I made a horror game in 25 days. Almost 2 years ago, I quit my job to pursue game development full-time. Now that's already quite silly, but I didn't even have a project to work on. So to fix that, I decided to join my first game jam. If you don't know what a game jam is, it's an event where developers create games in a short time frame, and often with a specific theme. I joined the GDFG game jam, which is 1 month long, and this time with the theme Safe in the Dark. I started brainstorming, and in the end I decided to go for a horror game, where you have to remain undetected by a lurking monster, by hiding in the shadows, and thus remaining safe in the dark. And although I'm an absolute coward when it comes to horror games, I thought this was the most appropriate idea. It was October after all, and it fits the theme. To keep it relatively simple, I decided to make a point-and-click game. So you have to solve puzzles in a handful of rooms, but you have to quickly turn the light off if the monster comes around, but you need the light on to be able to interact with stuff. So, live on Twitch, I began prototyping the game, and I actually got most of the core mechanics to work. I made a flickering light which you can turn on and off, a monster that walks back and forth,
here's Johnny,
and a couple of interactable objects, such as noisy traps that alert the monster, containers you can open, and items to pick up. Over the next couple of days I started working on the art. I settled on a canvas size and I started making some props, as well as a flashlight. I don't know why I didn't think of this, but let's be honest, a flashlight makes way more sense than a light switch on the wall. So yeah, thanks to MadChirpy for that idea. I'm starting to think that she might be the real game designer here. I also tried adding some color to the scene, but after some back and forth with the chat, we decided to stick with the 1-bit art style I used during testing. Happily or accidents, eh? I think it makes the game stand out a bit more, and having it fully colored could make the game look a little bit more cartoony, which might not be good for a horror game. So I started separating all the sprites into one big sprite sheet, and finally we started working on the monster. I decided to go for this creepy looking guy, but with some exaggerated features that made him feel a bit less human, and this is how it turned out. After putting some of this into the engine, I used Unity's Light 2D component to add a light source to the cursor. A very simple implementation, but it worked surprisingly well. For most interactions, I decided to just swap game objects. In other words, clicking on a closed cupboard door disables that object and then enables an object with the open door. No reason to overcomplicate things. I also added the art for the monster, and that's about the time when I started jump scaring myself. Those red eyes are super, yeah, I like him. Oh. Let's just say, that happened far more than once. But the way the monster works is actually fairly simple. When you start the game, he will walk towards the door. He'll wait for a bit, looking for the player. And if he doesn't spot you, he'll pick a new position on the opposite side and walk over there, before turning back towards the door again. Rinse and repeat. I randomized a lot of the values here so that it wouldn't follow a perfect predictable rhythm. Then it was time to fix the inventory and items. I made an inventory manager and a few items to pick up. Some simple UI as well as a system to combine certain items. And I also implemented the first tutorial tips, but rather than explaining everything through the tutorial itself, I decided to add a little cutscene to the start. Partly to set the scene, but also to explain the main mechanic through the narrative instead. So basically, you wake up in a dark room as someone's yanking on the door. They explain that you have to hurry up and find a way out. And then they explicitly tell the player not to get caught with the light on, before running away to meet that end. I think this turned out quite well because it clearly explains the main mechanic and the fact that you are in a hostile environment. But at this point I realized that we're already more than halfway through the jam, so we need to start working on some more content. So I sorted out some more art and began setting up the other rooms. To keep things simple, I wanted to make it like an escape room game. So you're locked in one room and you need to solve some puzzle to find the key and then progress to the next room to basically do the same thing again. I ended up making 4 different rooms, with puzzles getting slightly harder for each one, and in the final room you'll need to figure out the code to a safe, which ironically made the game fit the theme yet another time. You know, because it's a safe in the dark. No? Oh, okay. Anyway, there's still one thing we haven't talked about. The audio. I had my mate Lynn sort out some sound effects and an original soundtrack for the game. It turned out really nice. It's really easy to underestimate the impact of good audio, maybe especially in a horror game. But yeah, check this out. Tell me that ain't some juicy sound effects. I also made the footsteps of the monster pan and change in volume depending on his position. This was a really important detail because the player needs to have some ability to gauge where the monster is, otherwise it would be far too difficult. Okay, that's most of the core stuff, so let's speedrun the rest of it. I decided to call the game Shroud of Gloom, so I sorted out a logo and a main menu, made proper settings in the style of the game, fixed item descriptions for the inventory, added old floppy disks so you can find its checkpoints, screen shade to the jump scare as well as a transition, some tips on the game over screen, a timer at the end that shows you how long it took you, and I made the credit scene. And then I started testing out the browser build of the game, and to be honest, I had no issues with it whatsoever.
Jamie, pull that video up.
It might not be working perfectly, but it is working better than it did before. We take the small f***. Dude, can you stop the f***ing timing, man? But I did get it functional. So with that, I started working on the itch page, and I got a playable build out a couple of days early. And our first official playtest was by none other than the Captain Coder, who booted up the game live in front of like 70 viewers on Twitch. It was such a cool experience to finally be able to watch someone play my game until the game glitched out after like a minute.
A little glitch here, I'm trapped. Seems the game's not showing the menu.
I was f***ing dying on the inside, man. But I still enjoyed it and I got a lot of good feedback, so I went back to work and I fixed that bug, and I spent the next couple of days just crunching off stream, trying to polish the game as much as I could and get rid of any remaining issues. And we also had some more people play the game, so here's a compilation of some people getting scared.
How dare you?
Oh my god, holy shit! My god!
Jesus Christ.
But overall, they actually had a lot of really nice things to say.
I just love the aesthetic of this.
That's an effective use of limited pixels, camera cut, and audio. Holy lord.
Honestly, I love this game. Holy shit!
This is really cool, man. You should really be proud.
And I was very proud. You know, I put a lot of time and effort into this, more than 150 hours. And from my experience at the time, I actually think this turned out really good. Still, on the final day, I was up until the middle of the night, but I managed to submit the game 5 hours before the deadline. So the voting period began, I played through some of the other games, and a few days later, we got the results. Now, there weren't too many participants, but Shroud of Gloom got first place in every single category. Not too shabby for my first game jam, eh? But more importantly, I have actually continued working on this game for almost 2 years now, and it's changed a lot. It's now a full-on point-and-click horror adventure, and the full version is coming to Steam, so please head on over there, wishlist the game, and try out the new demo update. The old version is still up on itch as well. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thank you to Martin Puman, One Man, Coding Gree, Bjarne, Days Mace, Jin, Cheps Party, Toasty Stomp, Sandy G, Spectacular, and all of my other supporters on Twitch.